Okay, in this video we're going to start talking about Workbench. Workbench is a tool that we're going to use for a lot of our data work. And so this video is just going to go over some basics of Workbench, how to create projects, how to share projects with me when you need to turn them in, and we're also going to talk about importing data. So Workbench is at workbenchdata.com, and you'll sign up for an account, and once you do that and log in, Workbench uses the concept of workflows. So one workflow is kind of a process of bringing in data, analyzing it, maybe producing some visualizations. So you'll have many workflows. A project might have multiple workflows. You might have assignments that are a workflow. So let's go ahead and create a workflow. And the first thing we're going to do is tell it where our data is coming from. So for now, you have a lot of options. The ones that we'll be using for the most part are add from URL and upload. We'll also, in this class, most likely talk about scraping, but in this video we're going to cover adding from a URL and uploading. So let's choose add from URL first, and this is what a workflow looks like. So the first thing I want to do is give it a title so that I know what it is. So let's pretend that this is an assignment for class, and I'm going to call it exercise 1, Daniel Carter. So you're going to actually turn in your exercises in this class by sharing your workflows with me. So it's really important that you name your workflows in the way that we ask you to, and that'll probably usually be exercise, a number, and then your full name. All right, once we have that, workflows have tabs, and we might have multiple tabs later, but for now we're just going to have one tab, and then tabs have a series of steps. So you're going to think about this as just like a process or like a little machine that's going to do something with data, and it's going to go step by step as it does that. So the first thing we're going to do here is add data from a URL, because you can see right now our data table is blank. So if we're adding from a URL, we're basically just pointing it to data that is somewhere on the web. The example that we're going to use here is going to be from 538's GitHub repository. And don't know why it's not loading. Okay, that's fixed. So we're looking at 538's GitHub page where they post all the data from all their articles, and I'm going to use the data from their airline safety article, and I'm going to come in here. I've got a CSV file, so I'm going to click on this CSV file, and it's going to give me a nice view here, but I want just a link to the CSV file. So I'm going to hit raw, and it's going to give me a link that should stay the same for this CSV file. So I'm going to come back to Workbench. Alright, I'm going to come back to Workbench, and I'm going to paste that URL here to the add from URL step. And I've said it has a header row, and if we look at that CSV file, you would see that it does. A header row is just that the first line has the column header. So if I update this, it's going to go to that URL and it's going to read it in. And now a really nice thing about Workbench is that I can tell it to check if this CSV has changed. So this might be really nice if you had, say you had a CSV file from a city listing data on police reports, and they update it every month. You could build a workflow that builds say a graph from that and updates itself every month. So right now we have this set to manual. You could also have it update periodically every few days, and even tell you when the data changes, which is a really nice feature. In Workbench, you can add notes to each step, and this is something that I'm going to want you to do. So I'm going to want you to both tell me what the step is, and this is good when you come back and you've forgotten what this workflow does. So I'm going to say import flight safety data from 538 GitHub. And when you're doing your exercises, we might also ask you to add notes that answer questions or talk about the data or things like that. But right now we're just looking at Workbench and importing some data. You'll notice that all of your columns in Workbench have a type. So this is my airline column, and it's a text type. This is my available seat kilometer per week. I'm not really sure what that column means, but it's a number, and that seems right. These are all numbers. Occasionally you will have to change the format of a column. So if this was a date, for example, I would want to come here and say convert to date and time, so that I could then do things with that date, like select ranges and things like that. You can also sort columns. So let's see who had the highest number of fatalities between 85 and 99. It looks like Aeroflot, followed by Delta, and United Continental. So you'll notice when I do that, it adds a new step here, okay? And the way these steps work is if I click here, it's going to import that data, and basically it's going to run that step again. So I can kind of step through my workflow in this way, and I'm thinking I'm kind of building towards kind of my final look at the data. Or later we'll be building towards visualizations, but we're not quite there yet. Other things we can do here is potentially we could filter. So let's say I want to see just things that had more than 20 incidents in this column. So here, if this column is, I can say, let's see, number is greater than 20, I'm going to keep it. And if I run this, okay, I can see now there were 4 that had greater than 20 incidents in this date range. So this is something you might do as you're analyzing your data. It's also something you might do just as you're kind of exploring your data and you want to see what's there, see who had the most incidents. I can always delete this. So if I say, okay, that was interesting, I don't really care, I delete it, and I'm going to go back to the state of my data at this stage. So once I'm done, I can export this, and I could save it as a CSV, which would be really nice. And I can also share it. So this is how you'll turn things in. You'll go share, and you'll add collaborators. So my email address here that I use for Workbench is carter.daniel.w@gmail.com. If there are other instructors for the course, we'll let you know who to share it with. You will grant access, and then we'll be able to grade your work. And again, we're going to be looking a lot at your notes, so make sure you document your steps really carefully. So here, if you decide this sort is actually something you want to do, you'll want to type a note here and say sort by just so that we can kind of follow along and see what you've done. All right, so that was importing from a URL. We're also going to go over importing from a file that you've downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to say we're going to upload our data here. So it's going to be exactly the same, except we'll be uploading a file from our computer. So if I have data that either I've obtained directly from, say, a government agency or a source, or it's somewhere online that won't let me link to it, or it's somewhere online where I'm just not sure if they're going to update that file ever, and I don't trust them to keep it for me, and I think really what I want to do is just download it. This is what we'll do. So this is on data.world, and this is marriage rate data, and let's say this is the table that I want to work with. I can download it. And I'm going to just download that file. Started. Okay, I'm going to save the file. And when we come back to Workbench, I can just find the file that I downloaded, and we can import it just like we did before. And if I was actually working on this as part of a project, I would want to move this file somewhere into like a project folder or something. Okay, so again, we've got our data. I can see I've got 51 rows, 21 columns. It looks like all my columns are pretty good. They're all numbers, and that's what I would like them to be. You can see I have some nulls here. So maybe I want to say something like, how many null values do I have? So we don't have data, it looks like, for Georgia in 2014 and 2013. So I could say, let's see, all filter, and I want to know where 2014 is null, and I'll keep those, and I can see that, okay, it's only Georgia that has a null there. So I'm going to say, okay, that's interesting, and I'll delete that. Okay, so again, when you're done, you can export here, you can share it, and you will always have access to this workflow in your My Workflows area right here.